The great chamber of the Galactic Council was alive with blinding light and restless noise. Silver walls curved high above the heads of hundreds of alien delegates, their robes shining with the symbols of their worlds. The center platform glowed with the Council's emblem, a star wrapped in endless rings, and around it floated transparent screens showing one name in gold letters, Earth. The tension inside that chamber felt like heavy fog. You could almost taste it in the air. Every being in that room knew what was about to happen, but no one said it out loud. No one dared. Rows upon rows of alien delegates raised their hands slowly, their glowing emblems burning brighter with each vote. Some looked proud. Some looked nervous. A few looked afraid. But none looked at the Terran envoy standing alone at the center. The human was calm, too calm, wearing a black uniform that carried no colors and no rank. Only a small patch over the heart, an old Earth flag, faded and quiet. While every alien shouted or whispered in their corners, the human said nothing. He just watched. The vote continued like falling stones into a deep well. One by one, hand after hand, light after light. Every time a new vote was cast, the gold color around Earth's name dimmed a little more. It was like watching the sun sink behind the horizon. Slow, painful, and inevitable. Some delegates whispered to each other, pretending to be brave. They were always dangerous, one hissed. They grew too fast, another replied. This is the right choice, someone whispered a little too loudly, trying to convince themselves as much as others. The human's eyes moved over them like a blade. No anger, no fear, just silence. When the last hand rose, the chamber lights flickered, and the center display changed. Earth's name burned red. A low mechanical voice from the council core declared, "The vote is complete. Earth is hereby banished from the Galactic Council." The crowd erupted. Applause from some species, cautious nods from others, a few uneasy glances from those who knew history too well. For the first time in decades, a founding member of the outer colonies was being erased. They thought they had won. They thought humanity would beg. They were wrong. The Terran envoy didn't move at first. He just stood under the burning red letters, letting the echoes of celebration wash over him like cold rain. It was a strange moment. He was alone, surrounded by hundreds, yet it felt like the entire room was trapped inside the weight of his silence. Slowly, deliberately, he raised his head. His eyes were calm, but behind them, there was something sharp, something dangerous. The kind of silence that doesn't mean weakness, it means warning. No one offered mercy. No one said his name. No one dared to ask what Earth would do next, because deep inside they already knew. For years they had watched humanity build. For years they had grown nervous at the speed of human ships, the size of their colonies, the reach of their technology. Humanity had never needed the Council. It had simply chosen to walk beside them. Now, with one vote, they had pushed them away. The envoy gave a single nod, nothing more. He didn't shout. He didn't beg. He didn't curse their names like other banished races had done before. He just turned his back and walked toward the exit. His boots struck the floor like quiet drums, echoing through the chamber louder than all the alien voices. Each step felt like a countdown. By the time the door closed behind him, the noise of celebration sounded weaker, smaller. Something had shifted in that room. They could all feel it, even if they didn't want to admit it. One of the older alien delegates leaned closer to another and whispered, "Why didn't he say anything?" His companion, a tall creature with silver skin, shook its head slowly. "Because they don't need to," it replied. "That's what frightens me." Outside the council hall, the corridors were long, cold, and empty. The envoy walked without looking back, his figure swallowed by the shadows of the massive structure. A soft hum followed him, the distant vibration of ships moving in orbit above the council world. He reached a docking bay where a small black shuttle waited. No markings, no banners, just a single flag folded neatly inside. As he climbed the ramp, a small communicator on his wrist blinked once. He pressed it without hesitation. A cold voice on the other end asked, "Was it done?" The envoy stared out at the stars and answered softly, "They've made their choice. In orbit, a Terran destroyer detached itself from the traffic lanes. It didn't request permission to leave. It didn't need to. As it slid into the black of space, its engines dimmed, leaving no trace behind. To the Council's sensors, it was just gone, vanished, like a shadow melting into darkness. Back inside the chamber, the alien delegates were still celebrating their decision. Some were already making deals to divide trade routes once controlled by Earth. Others whispered of mining rights, abandoned outposts, and future profits. But in the far corner of the room, the oldest member of the Council sat in silence. He had seen what happened the last time someone underestimated humans. He remembered the wars, the fire, the silence that came before the storm. And now he could feel it again. They should have listened, he muttered, but no one heard him. The official statement was released across the galaxy within the hour. Earth has been removed from the Galactic Council with immediate effect. All privileges and alliances are suspended. Across thousands of worlds, people read the message in silence. Some cheered, some shrugged, but on certain distant colonies, in hidden outposts, and deep inside Terran fleets, quiet preparations began. No speeches, no rallies, just silent movement. On the outer rim of known space, a massive structure turned slowly, hidden behind a dying star. Black steel towers stretched across a shadowed station the size of a moon. Human engineers moved through dark corridors, speaking in low voices. Screens flickered with quiet commands. Engines slept beneath layers of armor, waiting. No one outside the Terran command even knew this place existed. It had no name on the maps, no coordinates on the charts, but every Terran officer knew its purpose. In a silent command chamber, a man in a long black coat watched the council announcement on a glowing screen. His eyes were tired but focused. Around him, officers stood at attention. No one clapped. No one smiled. They had expected this moment for years. "They've made their choice," he said. His voice carried through the chamber like a quiet storm. "Now we will make ours." Orders spread through the network like lightning. Across the stars, hundreds of hidden stations woke up. Lights flickered on. Engines hummed softly. Ships that had slept for decades opened their metal eyes. Humanity didn't rage. Humanity didn't scream. It just moved. Quiet, cold, and unstoppable. Meanwhile, on the Council's homeworld, the alien delegates returned to their towers, celebrating their decision. To them, it was over. They believed they had crushed a rival, ended a threat. But in truth, they had just given birth to a storm. A storm that would not speak. A storm that would not warn. A storm that would come wrapped in silence. And in the empty council chamber, the red glow over Earth's name still burned like a wound. The lights around it dimmed slowly, but that color stayed, as if refusing to fade. The guards who stood watch felt a strange chill in the air. None of them could explain it. They only knew one thing: the silence felt alive. Far away, inside the darkness between stars, 1,000 Terran ships began to move. They did not fly in bright lines like the council fleets. They glided through shadows, unseen. No one could track them. No one could stop them. The galaxy had banished Earth, but Earth had not vanished. It had simply gone quiet. And that was the loudest message of all. The vote had been made. The galaxy thought it had won. But history had already started writing a very different story. One that began not with war, but with silence. The weeks after the vote felt strange to everyone, even those who had supported the banishment. Earth disappeared from the galactic stage like a shadow slipping under the door. One day there were Terran ships in every major system, hauling goods, trading technology, providing security, and the next there was nothing. No trade ships, no messages, no chatter on the communication nets. Every Terran embassy on the Council worlds went dark at the same time, their black flags lowered without a word. At first, the Council believed this was surrender, a quiet acceptance of their decision. They told themselves that humanity had no power without the Council's protection, that the humans would slowly fade into the background of history like so many banished races before. But deep down, even the boldest among them felt a cold prickle under their skin. Because humanity had never been like the others. It didn't beg. It built. On the Council's core world, traders arrived to find the Terran trading quarter sealed. Every hangar locked, every port offline, every starship bay emptied. Thousands of alien workers who relied on Terran contracts were left staring at closed gates. On the outer colonies, stations once bustling with human freighters now floated in silence. Their lights dimmed, their docks empty. Even the pirate fleets that often preyed on Terran convoys couldn't find a single ship to attack. Earth's presence had vanished from the stars like smoke caught in a storm. And with that absence came unease. Many alien races had built their wealth on Terran trade routes, on Terran engines, on Terran protection in the lawless edges of the galaxy. Now that protection was gone, and the void it left behind was growing. In the Council meeting hall, some tried to celebrate. They signed new deals to take over Terran trade routes. They drew lines on star maps, dividing what they believed were abandoned territories. But their words felt hollow, their hands slightly trembling as they pointed to the dark sectors. Because those territories were not abandoned, not really. They were just quiet. Too quiet. Every scout ship the Council sent toward Earth's old colonies returned with the same report. Empty lanes, silent stations, no heat signatures, no chatter. It was like staring into a black ocean where something moved beneath the surface but refused to be seen. Then the disappearances began. At first it was small. A scout ship failed to return from the Sol system. A mining freighter was found drifting with no crew, its black box wiped clean. The Council dismissed it as pirates or system failures, or the chaos left behind after Earth's retreat. But more reports followed. A whole convoy vanished near the Kepler rim. 2 patrol ships stopped responding near Mars orbit. A research station near the Terran frontier went dark without sending a single distress signal. And yet, no debris was found. No wreckage. Just silence. In the dark corners of the galaxy, whispers began to spread. Whispers of Terran fleets hidden in the shadows. Whispers of silent black ships that moved without light, without sound. Merchant crews spoke of seeing shapes in the distance, massive silhouettes that vanished the moment sensors tried to lock on. Officially, the Council denied everything. They said humanity had turned inward. They said it was just fear talking. But behind closed doors, even the most powerful delegates asked the same question. Where did the humans go? In a distant system, far away from the Council's shining worlds, the truth was taking shape. Massive stations hidden inside asteroid belts glowed with activity. Terran engineers moved in silence, guided by orders that had been waiting years for this moment. New warships emerged from hidden shipyards, their black hulls absorbing the starlight around them. Supply chains shifted underground, invisible to the Council's eyes. Colonies that had once been open and welcoming turned into fortresses, their signals buried under layers of encrypted silence. Earth had not disappeared. It had gone home, closed its doors, and locked the galaxy out. On the Council's homeworld, the first official reports of panic began to appear. Trade markets trembled. Shipping insurance costs tripled overnight. Outer colonies complained of increased pirate activity, but no one dared to say what they truly feared. Without humanity, the edges of the galaxy were vulnerable. Terran fleets had been the quiet watchers of those regions, the ones who handled problems no one else wanted to. And now, with them gone, the shadows were growing. One night, a group of Council delegates gathered in a private chamber deep inside the central spire. They spoke in low voices, afraid to be overheard. One of them, an old delegate with skin like polished stone, whispered, "We should have never pushed them out. You don't silence a storm. You only give it time to grow." Another delegate shook his head and said, "They are just humans. They will come back begging for help." But his voice trembled, betraying the lie. Everyone in that room remembered what humanity had done in the past. They remembered the war that ended in silence. They remembered the worlds rebuilt with iron will. And they remembered that humans did not beg. The official news channels stayed quiet about the disappearances, but underground networks told different stories. They spoke of a Terran ship appearing at the edge of a distant sector. Black, sharp, moving like a ghost. No identification. No warnings. It passed through the system like a shadow, leaving behind ships with dead engines and terrified crews. No shots were fired. No damage was found. Only silence. The Council pretended not to hear, but fear was spreading faster than their denials. Across the galaxy, the word banishment began to taste different. It no longer sounded like victory. It sounded like a mistake. A cold wind seemed to move through every trading hub, every border outpost, every colony that had once trusted the Council to keep order. People began asking questions that had no answers. What were the humans building out there? Why had they gone so quiet? What did silence mean to a species that had conquered the void without help? And somewhere in the black, hidden behind dying suns and fractured moons, the answer was already being forged. Earth was not broken. It was preparing. Humanity had heard the Council's vote and responded in the only way it knew how. Not with rage, not with begging, not with noise, but with quiet work, cold planning, and a storm waiting to be unleashed. The Council had celebrated the banishment as a clean cut, a final decision that would weaken humanity and strengthen their control. But they did not realize what they had truly done. They had united the Terran colonies in a way no speech ever could. For the first time in centuries, every Terran outpost, every ship, every captain had one purpose, one direction, one silence. The Council didn't know it yet, but their galaxy had just entered the waiting hour. And in that hour, humanity was not fading. Humanity was sharpening its blade in the dark. Rumors have a way of growing in the dark, and in the weeks that followed, the galaxy became a nest of whispers. No one could say for certain where the humans had gone, but everyone felt it. It was in the quiet between transmissions, in the strange gaps in trade routes, in the shiver that ran through comm stations when the lights dimmed for no reason. At first, the Council tried to control the narrative, releasing confident statements, claiming that the Terran retreat was proof of their weakness. But their words rang hollow. Merchants stopped trusting the old routes. Explorers reported empty stations with fresh footprints. Patrols started coming back late or not at all. And in the places where the stars burned cold and silent, people swore they heard something breathing in the void. The first real signal came from the Rim, a small communication array, run by a forgotten species on a mining moon, picked up an encrypted burst. It lasted less than a second. A noise, a flash, then gone. But the technicians who captured it said it wasn't random. It was clean, sharp, and far too advanced to be anything but deliberate. When the Council's analysts decrypted the header, their blood ran cold. The signal didn't carry a message, carried a signature. It was Terran code. Ancient, silent, and impossible to trace. They had no idea where it came from. It was as if the humans had reached out of nowhere just to remind the galaxy they were still listening. In response, the Council increased its patrols near the Terran frontier. Fleets of warships began sweeping the outer sectors, but they found nothing. Not a single trace of human colonies. It was as if every world had folded into darkness. Then, slowly, the disappearances grew bolder. A long-range scanner station near Kepler went silent mid-transmission. A convoy of 6 freighters vanished after entering a Terran route. A military listening post sent a single word before shutting down completely. Movement. No one knew what that meant. But the Council's top generals understood something terrifying. This was not chaos. This was control. The humans were choosing where to strike, who to scare, and how to make their silence louder than any war cry. In the Council's war chamber, the high delegates argued. Some demanded a full invasion of Sol, to end the threat once and for all. Others refused, warning that if they struck without knowing what awaited them, it could trigger something far worse. One delegate slammed his hands against the glowing table and shouted, "They are testing us!" But the oldest voice in the room, a thin alien with eyes like dark water, simply whispered, "No, they are watching." And that silence crushed the room into uneasy quiet. Meanwhile, out in the black, alien ships began reporting encounters. A merchant vessel near the old Jupiter lane claimed to have seen a shape passing them at impossible speed. It didn't show up on scanners, but every light on the ship flickered when it passed. Another patrol reported their engines dying one by one, as if something was drawing power out of them. When they finally regained control, they found a single piece of metal fused into the hull. A small emblem, a broken council star wrapped in iron. No attack, no blood, just a quiet warning. The whispers spread through the galaxy faster than any council broadcast. Dockworkers swore that Terran spies were walking among them. Traders claimed to see black ships gliding under sensor range. Whole sectors began refusing travel near the old Terran trade lines. And for the first time in decades, the Council realized something they didn't want to admit out loud. Fear was no longer in their control. Then came the Kepler incident. A Council scout group was patrolling near an abandoned Terran outpost when their signals went dark. Hours later, a single transmission reached the Council net. A distorted voice whispered, "They're not gone. They're watching." The signal ended with a burst of static. When a rescue team arrived, they found the patrol ships perfectly intact, their systems online, their engines warm, but every crew member was gone. Not dead, gone. As if they had stepped out of reality. No signs of a struggle, no trace of violence, just silence. The Council tried to hide the event, but secrets rot quickly in a frightened galaxy. Within days, the Kepler incident was known from the core to the outer rim. People whispered about it in shadowed cantinas, in military barracks, in the bridges of long-haul freighters. The story changed with every retelling, but the fear stayed the same. Humanity was moving in the dark. Humanity was watching. Humanity was waiting. Inside a hidden chamber deep within the Council Tower, a private meeting took place. Only 7 individuals were invited. No cameras, no records. The Grand Speaker stood at the head of the table, her pale hands trembling slightly, though she tried to hide it. "We underestimated them," she said. "We believed the banishment would break them. Instead, it's united them." One of the admirals leaned forward. "They've gone dark, but they haven't disappeared. This is strategy, not panic. And if they're using silence as a weapon, it means they're already 2 steps ahead of us." The room grew still. No one wanted to say it, but everyone thought it. They had not banished a weak enemy. They had provoked a patient one. Outside that room, the galaxy trembled in small ways. Insurance rates for travel near Terran sectors skyrocketed. Colonies near the frontier sent desperate messages for protection. Pirate fleets, once bold, vanished without explanation. And somewhere beyond the reach of Council sensors, massive Terran shipyards pulsed quietly with light. Fleets were growing. Weapons were waiting. And none of it was visible. The Council sent more fleets. They pushed their scanners deeper, forced their ships into the black. But every mission ended the same way. Nothing to see, nothing to catch, nothing to fight. Only whispers, only silence. And in the back of every soldier's mind, a single thought began to take root. What if the war had already begun, and they just couldn't see it? The first deserters came from the border patrols. Low-ranking officers refused to fly routes near Terran space. Some claimed their ships felt wrong when they got too close, as if the stars themselves were watching. Others said they heard whispers over the comms, voices that didn't belong to anyone on the ship. None of it was proven, but none of it needed to be. Fear had already done its work. At night, inside the Grand Council city, diplomats looked out of their shining towers and stared at the stars, suddenly realizing how dark they were without Terran ships moving among them. Before the vote, Earth had been loud, loud in trade, loud in progress, loud in presence. Now the quiet they left behind was deafening. It crawled under the skin of the galaxy like a cold wind. And far away, in the darkness beyond mapped space, a single Terran flagship floated in silence. No lights, no broadcast, no signal. Just a cold hull of black steel watching the stars. Inside, a voice spoke over the quiet comms. "They're afraid," the commander said. A soft reply came through the dark. "Good. Let them be." The council thought it had erased humanity with one vote. But it had only erased its own sense of safety. The whispers were not the threat. They were the warning. And in the void, humanity waited, silent as a blade still in its sheath, letting the galaxy tremble before the strike. The night the first shadow appeared, everything changed. It started quietly, just like everything else since the vote. A convoy of 17 ships was moving through the rim, a mix of merchant freighters and lightly armed escorts. It was a routine supply run, a route that used to be one of the busiest in the galaxy when Terran ships still moved openly. The Council had reassured the merchants that the lanes were safe now, that humanity was gone and their absence meant opportunity. But deep down, everyone in that convoy felt the silence in those star lanes. No chatter, no traffic, just darkness stretching out forever. The lead escort picked up something faint on long-range sensors. A flicker, a ghost. It was there for less than a second, then gone. The captain dismissed it as static, but the crew exchanged uneasy looks. Minutes passed. Then the lights on the outer freighters flickered, one by one. Engines stuttered, guidance systems failed. The convoy slowed without warning, their formation breaking apart like leaves in the wind. The escort captain shouted orders, demanding status reports, but the comm channels were filled with static. And then, something passed between the ships. They never saw it clearly. It didn't appear on the screens. It didn't register on the scanners. It was a shape, a massive, silent outline sliding through the darkness like a predator under black water. Some swore it blotted out the stars behind it. The freighter crews panicked, firing distress signals, but none of the calls made it out of the system. In less than 3 minutes, the entire convoy went dark. The last transmission received by a distant relay was a whisper, a trembling voice saying, "It's here." 2 hours later, Council response ships arrived. They found the convoy drifting in perfect silence. Every ship was intact. No signs of battle. No broken hulls. No debris. All systems were dead, every reactor cold, every console blank. But the strangest thing was the crew. They weren't there. Not a single body. Not a trace of a fight. Only the ships, floating in stillness, with a single Terran beacon pulsing slowly in the void. A small metal device attached to the lead freighter. It didn't transmit words, only a steady heartbeat sound. One pulse every second. Cold, precise. A warning that didn't need language. When the report reached the Council, the chamber fell silent. The admirals barked questions, but the investigation team had no answers. They didn't even know how the beacon had been placed. No ship had approached. No jump signatures were recorded. It was as if the Terrans had walked through the darkness itself. That was the night the Council stopped pretending this was just rumors. This was real. Humanity was out there. And they were not hiding, they were hunting. Patrols increased along the rim, but it didn't matter. A week later it happened again. Another convoy. Same result. No ships destroyed, no weapons fired, no survivors. Just silence and a single Terran beacon left behind like a signature. A message to the Council. We are here. Merchants began refusing to travel along old Terran lanes. Insurance companies tripled their rates overnight. Some colonies stopped receiving supplies entirely. And the shadow sightings grew more frequent. Crews spoke of dark shapes gliding along the edges of sensor range, never attacking, only watching. In the war rooms, the Council generals argued for preemptive strikes. We must strike Earth itself before they strike us. One roared, his claws scraping the table. But others were smarter or more afraid. You can't strike what you can't find, another whispered. They've erased their trails. They move like ghosts. If we attack blind, we'll fall right into their trap. They stared at the star map where the Terran sectors used to glow with trade routes and colonies. Now those same sectors were black holes on the map. No signals, no coordinates, just quiet space. Waiting. One admiral played the beacon recording again and again. That heartbeat. Steady. Calm. Unhurried. This isn't an attack, he said softly. This is a message. They're showing us they can reach anywhere. And they're not afraid to wait. Across the galaxy, the legend of the Black Fleet began to spread. No one had seen it clearly. No one had proof. But every whisper carried the same image. A fleet of Terran warships blacker than the void itself, moving without engines, cloaked in silence. Some said they used technology the Council didn't understand. Others said the humans had always been hiding their true strength, building in secret far from the Council's gaze. Whatever the truth was, fear grew faster than facts. Convoys rerouted. Border systems began preparing for evacuation. Even the pirate lords whispered of ghost ships that swallowed fleets whole. Then came the Helios fracture. A Council strike group of 12 cruisers was sent to investigate a quiet sector where several ships had disappeared. It was supposed to be a show of force. They entered the system confidently, broadcasting their presence, daring any Terran ship to reveal itself. For hours, nothing happened. Then the stars blinked out. Not all of them, just a patch of the sky, as if something vast had drifted between the system and the light. Sensors screamed warnings but detected nothing. A wall of black moved through the fleet like a silent tide. One by one, the cruisers lost power. No weapons fired. No explosions. Just silence. Moments later, every ship vanished from the network. When a single damaged cruiser was later recovered, its logs showed only 7 seconds of footage. A dark shadow blotting out the stars, a sound like breathing through static, and then everything went black. The Council had sent its warships to intimidate humanity. Instead, humanity had shown them what real power looked like. The Council held an emergency session. Every delegate shouted over the other. Some demanded peace talks, others screamed for war. But through the chaos, a single question echoed in everyone's mind. If humanity could strike convoys, patrol fleets, and war groups without being seen, what could they do if they decided to strike the core worlds? And the terrifying part wasn't that no one knew the answer. The terrifying part was that humanity hadn't struck yet. All they had done was watch. Across the galaxy, lights dimmed earlier, convoys traveled in silence, and soldiers slept with their weapons close. Not because they expected a battle, but because they feared the silence itself. The Black Fleet didn't need to make speeches. It didn't need to announce its strength. It let the galaxy scare itself. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't firepower. It was fear. And in the farthest reaches of space, hidden behind a dead star, a fleet of black steel warships floated in perfect formation, their engines dark, their hulls swallowing light. A voice crackled through the flagship's command room. "Council forces are nervous," a young officer said. The commander stood at the window, watching the distant glow of alien systems. His voice was calm. "Good. We're just getting started." The shadow had appeared, and the galaxy finally understood what the Terran silence truly meant. It wasn't retreat. It was the beginning of something far worse. Humanity had stepped out of the light not to hide, but to choose the moment the galaxy would learn to fear the dark. The Council chamber was supposed to be a place of power, a fortress of reason and control, but on that night it felt more like a tomb. The delegates gathered beneath the silver dome, their faces pale under the glowing screens that showed the latest fleet reports. Convoys lost, patrols vanished, border systems on the edge of collapse. The once mighty Council fleets were chasing ghosts in the dark. Whispers of the Black Fleet were now no longer whispers. They were reports stamped with red urgency. No one wanted to say it out loud, but everyone in that chamber knew what it meant. Humanity wasn't hiding anymore. It was circling them. The Grand Speaker slammed her hand on the table, the sound echoing sharply through the hall. "Enough," she snapped. "We will not let a banished race make a mockery of this council." But her voice, which once commanded empires, now trembled. Every delegate could hear it. A general from the Southern Arm stood up, his uniform stiff, his jaw locked tight. "This is not a mockery," he said slowly. "This is a demonstration." He tapped a console, and the lights dimmed as a recording began to play. It was footage from the Helios fracture, recovered from the last seconds of the doomed strike group. At first, nothing, just stars and silence. Then, slowly, a wall of darkness slid across the stars like a curtain being drawn. No sound, no flashes, just that impossible shape swallowing everything. And then static. When the footage ended, no one spoke. For a long moment, the entire chamber was silent, each delegate trapped in the same quiet fear. It wasn't just the shadow they feared. It was the precision, the control, the message that came without words. Humanity was not begging for war. Humanity was preparing the stage for something bigger. A thin delegate from the outer sectors broke the silence first. "We thought we pushed them out," he whispered, his long fingers trembling. "But what if we only pushed them into the shadows?" Another delegate laughed nervously, the sound hollow. "They are human. Their numbers are small. We have the fleets. We have the council. They cannot defeat us." But no one looked convinced, not even him. Then, without warning, every screen in the chamber flickered. The light from the dome dimmed to black. The entire hall fell into darkness. Alarms didn't sound. Systems didn't scream. It was just quiet. Then, one by one, the screens lit up again, not with council signals but with a single symbol. A broken star wrapped in iron chains. The Terran emblem. A voice filled the chamber, soft, calm, and terribly controlled. "You voted to banish us, so we voted to build without you." The voice wasn't angry. It wasn't loud. Carried no threat. It didn't need one. The delegates sat frozen as the image shifted. Grainy but clear. Massive shipyards stretching across the void. Orbital stations built in silence. Entire fleets drifting in formation like black sharks in still water. The image zoomed out to show something even worse. Hidden networks of colonies that no one in the council had ever known about. Entire Terran systems, fortified and shielded from every sensor, silently thriving in the dark. They had not been banished. They had simply been waiting. The Grand Speaker tried to override the signal, but every attempt failed. The Terran voice continued. "While you argued, we built. While you watched, we disappeared. While you celebrated, we prepared. You took your vote in the light. We answered in the dark." The screens flashed again. This time it wasn't shipyards. It was numbers, ship counts, fleet strength, weapons arrays. They weren't bragging. They were showing the truth. Humanity was no longer one planet under the Council's watch. Humanity had become a power that didn't need the Council at all. The transmission ended as suddenly as it began, leaving only darkness and the faint hum of dead systems rebooting. When the lights returned, every delegate looked smaller, weaker. They all understood now. The banishment had not weakened Earth. It had set it free. A military commander stood, his face pale beneath his ceremonial crest. "If what we saw is true, they've been preparing this for years, maybe decades." Another slammed his fist against the table. "Why didn't our sensors detect them? How could they build that much without anyone noticing?" The Grand Speaker whispered the answer that everyone already knew. Because they wanted it that way. The Council had grown arrogant, blind behind their walls of bureaucracy and politics. They had forgotten who humanity was. They had seen a single world, a single species, and thought them small. They forgot that humanity had always thrived under pressure. It didn't need permission to survive. It only needed time. And time was exactly what the banishment had given them. Across the galaxy, the message spread like wildfire. Pirate fleets surrendered entire sectors overnight, refusing to face the silent Terran ships. Outer colonies pledged neutrality, terrified to take sides. And even some Council worlds began questioning whether the Council could still protect them. For the first time in generations, the Council wasn't the loudest voice in the galaxy anymore. Humanity was, but not with words. With silence, with shadows, with the quiet strength of a storm that had already formed. In the Terran Command Center deep in the black, the transmission's end triggered a quiet round of confirmation signals. No cheering, no celebration, just silent nods, officers standing at their stations. Ready. One of them turned to the commander and asked softly, "Do you think they understood the message?" The commander looked out the viewport at the massive fleet drifting in the void. "Oh, they understood," he said, his voice steady. "And now they'll try to stop what they can't see." Back in the council chamber, the panic was already growing like cracks in glass. Some demanded immediate war. Others whispered for surrender. Some just sat in silence, staring at the symbol on their screens as if they could still see it. The Grand Speaker closed her eyes for a moment and finally said what no one wanted to hear. We didn't banish them. We unleashed them. And out there, beyond the edge of the Council's light, the Terran fleets continued to move in perfect silence. Their ships did not roar. Their banners did not wave. They didn't need to shout to be heard. The galaxy had seen enough. Humanity had revealed its hand, not through speeches or battles, but with a single message. We are ready, and we do not need your permission. The first time the Terran fleet revealed itself, it was like watching the night sky tear open. It happened on the edge of Council space, near the Carries Gate, a strategic trade hub that had once been one of the busiest routes in the galaxy. Thousands of ships passed through its wormhole every day. For years, the Council had built their confidence on the idea that no one could threaten this route. They called it untouchable. They were wrong. The silence broke just after dawn cycle when the Carries Gate's early warning satellites began shutting down one by one, their signals vanishing into static. The operators in the control tower thought it was a glitch. They rebooted systems, ran diagnostics, checked for pirate activity. But nothing showed up. It wasn't pirates. It wasn't a glitch. It was something bigger, something that didn't need to hide. A few minutes later, the stars around the gate dimmed. It wasn't nightfall and it wasn't a power failure. It was something blocking the light. One operator looked up from his console and froze. Outside the observation window, hundreds of black shapes slid out of the dark, their hulls absorbing the starlight. They moved without engine flares, without transmissions, without anything that could be tracked. Perfect formation, perfect silence. At first the crew didn't believe what they were seeing. They thought it was a trick. But as the shadows kept growing larger, the truth set in. The Terrans had arrived. The Council defense fleet scrambled in panic. Sirens roared through the Carries defense stations. Dozens of alien warships activated their drives, forming a line in front of the wormhole. Commanders shouted over open comms, ordering the Terran fleet to identify itself. But the humans did not respond. They didn't even turn their lights on. They simply held their position, blocking the entire route. A wall of warships stretching across the void like a black tide. The silence was worse than any battle cry. Every second it lasted, the fear grew thicker. A young alien lieutenant on one of the defense ships whispered, "They're not moving. They're not charging weapons. What do they want?" His captain answered without looking away from the window, "They don't have to want anything. They've already won by being here." And he was right. For the first time in its long history, the Council couldn't move its own fleet through its own gate without permission. The Council fleet opened fire first. A panicked commander ordered a warning shot across the Terran line. A single beam of blue energy cut across space. It didn't hit anything. It didn't need to. The moment it passed, the black ships moved. Not in chaos. Not in a rush. In perfect, terrifying coordination. Their formation shifted like a single living creature. Weapon systems that no one had ever seen before came online. Not with bright flashes but with a low pulse of invisible power. The Council ship's shields flickered, overloaded without a single missile fired. In less than 10 seconds, the Council's forward line lost all power. Engines dead. Comms dead. Their ships just floated, helpless. The Terran flagship moved to the center of the formation, a colossal vessel shaped like a blade cutting through the stars. No name on its hull. No insignia. Just black steel and silence. A single narrowband transmission was sent to every ship in the sector. One voice. Calm. Controlled. Do not cross this line. That was all. No demands. No negotiations. Just a statement. The Council fleet hesitated. For the first time in its proud history, it backed away. News of Carries Gate spread like fire through dry grass. Every trade route in the galaxy fell into chaos. Convoys rerouted. Merchants panicked. Military outposts trembled. The Black Fleet was no longer a rumor. It was real. And it was sitting at the most strategic gate in the galaxy like a silent judge. Within days, 2 more gates were surrounded the same way. Humanity didn't need to fire a single shot. The Council routes were being strangled without a war even starting. In the Council's war chamber, Panic boiled beneath the surface. Maps of their own space lit up with red sectors, places they could no longer control. One admiral slammed his fist into the table. "They're not attacking us. They're cutting us off." A diplomat whispered, "This isn't war. This is a siege." The Grand Speaker stared at the star map, her hands trembling. "They're showing us what happens when we push them away." Meanwhile, in the Terran command center buried deep in the void, officers worked quietly around glowing tactical displays. No shouting, no chaos, just methodical control. Every fleet movement had been planned long before the vote. Humanity had always known this day would come. One officer leaned closer to the commander and said softly, "They're scared." The commander didn't look away from the map. "They should be." Alien fleets began pulling back from frontier worlds, too afraid to face the silent line of Terran warships. Planetary governors begged the Council for reinforcements, but there were no reinforcements to send. Every major military corridor was under Terran control. What had once been Council strength, its trade routes, its gate network, its fleet positioning, had become its greatest weakness. Humanity didn't just attack the Council. It wrapped its hands around the galaxy's throat and squeezed without saying a word. Merchant guilds started defecting. Outer colonies began quietly reaching out to the Terrans for safe passage. No shots fired. No battles won. Just quiet surrender. The Council's power had always relied on control, on fear of their strength. But now the galaxy feared someone else more. A force that didn't threaten. A force that didn't brag. A force that simply was. The Council attempted a counterattack near the Titan corridor, sending 4 fleets to break the blockade. They never made it to the gate. Their transmissions were intercepted, rerouted, and silenced. Hours later, their ships reappeared on long-range scans. All floating, no damage, engines offline, crews unconscious. Every hull marked with the same emblem, a broken star in chains. Terrans didn't want prisoners. They wanted witnesses. In one desperate meeting, a senior general whispered the words no one wanted to hear. "We thought we were the center of the galaxy," he said, his voice shaking. "But they built an empire right under our nose. An empire that doesn't speak. It acts." The room stayed silent. No one argued because everyone knew it was true. Across the black of space, the Terran fleet continued its quiet advance. No songs of war. No grand declarations. Just one line drawn across the galaxy that no one dared to cross. And as the alien delegates argued and panicked behind their walls, humanity waited, calm as stone. They had taken the most powerful structure in the galaxy without firing a single shot. Not because they were louder, but because silence was stronger than fear. At Carey's gate, the flagship hovered at the center of the Terran line, watching the wormhole swirl like a wounded animal. On the bridge, the commander's voice broke the quiet. "They thought banishment was the end," he said softly. "But it was only the beginning." The stars reflected off the black hulls of hundreds of ships, silent and ready. And far away, in the heart of the galaxy, the Council could feel it closing in, the end of their era and the rise of a silent empire. The Council had always believed its chamber was untouchable, a place where power itself could not be challenged. But on that night, it was suffocating with fear. The air felt thick, the lights too dim, and the silence between the delegates was louder than any speech. All across the galaxy, Terran fleets sat like black shadows over the gates, silent, unmoving, unbroken. No war had been declared, no official demands sent, and yet every major route, every trade artery, every lifeline the Council once controlled was wrapped in iron chains. Humanity had spoken without speaking, and the galaxy had listened. Inside the chamber, the Grand Speaker struggled to keep her voice steady. "We will not bow to terrorists," she said, but no one looked at her. Delegates stared at their screens instead, watching the slow, steady spread of red across the star map. One system, then 2, then 4. The Council's reach was shrinking with every hour, not because of war, but because of silence. Merchant fleets were rerouting under Terran escort. Colonies once loyal to the Council were opening their gates to Terran convoys. No one was fighting the council. They were simply leaving it behind. The oldest delegate, a veteran of forgotten wars, finally stood. His voice was low but clear, echoing through the quiet chamber. "We built our empire on control," he said. "But control is a fragile thing. It only works when people believe in it. And now, they don't believe anymore." His words hung in the air like a blade. No one dared to answer him. Outside, the world was already changing, whether the council admitted it or not. Then the lights in the chamber flickered. One by one, the giant screens along the walls went dark. The delegates rose to their feet, panic spreading through the room like fire in dry grass. No alarms sounded. No security forces came running. Just darkness. Then a soft hum filled the air, calm and steady, like a slow heartbeat. Every delegate froze. They had heard that sound before. It was the same pulse left behind on every ship, every convoy, every fleet that had gone dark. The Terran signal. And this time it wasn't out there in the dark. It was inside the council's most protected chamber. The ceiling lit up with a single image. A black flag with a broken star wrapped in iron chains. It floated above the chamber like a shadow that couldn't be erased. A voice followed, calm, precise and human. "You banished us," it said. "You silenced us. You thought that would end us. But you forgot. We do not need your permission to exist. No threats, no shouts, just the kind of quiet that crawled under the skin and stayed there." Delegates shouted for security, but nothing worked. Their systems were locked, their networks frozen, every console flashing the same Terran emblem. Humanity hadn't sent fleets to this chamber. It didn't need to. It had already walked through their defenses without stepping inside. The Council, the once mighty rulers of the galaxy, were standing inside their own house like prisoners. The voice returned. "For centuries you built walls and called it peace. You controlled gates and called it order. You used fear to keep the galaxy in your hands. But fear changes shape. It belongs to us now." The image shifted. A live transmission filled the chamber. It wasn't a fleet in the distance this time. It was a fleet above them. The Council's homeworld. Thousands of black Terran warships hung in perfect silence above their skies. No engines flared. No weapons fired. But every sensor confirmed the truth: they were surrounded. The Grand Speaker stumbled forward, her face pale, her voice cracking. "What do you want?" she whispered. The voice didn't hesitate. "Nothing." The word fell like a stone. "You already gave us everything when you cast us out. You showed us how much stronger we could be without you." Panic spread like a storm. Some delegates demanded surrender. Others screamed for an attack. But the Council fleet wasn't moving. They knew if they fired, they would be crushed before they could even finish the order. For all their pride, all their power, they had no way out. The galaxy wasn't theirs anymore. Then, something strange happened. The Terran flagship above the Council world turned slowly, not toward the planet but away from it. One by one, the rest of the fleet followed, disappearing back into the black like shadows retreating from light. No ultimatum, no invasion, no occupation, just silence. They came not to destroy the Council, but to show them how small they truly were. When the lights in the chamber returned, no one spoke. Every delegate sat frozen, knowing they had witnessed something far worse than a war. Humanity had not needed to strike. It had won without firing a single shot. The Council's strength had always been its image of control, and humanity had shattered that image in one night. A young delegate broke the silence. "Why didn't they finish us?" The old one answered, his voice low. "Because they don't need to. They've already taken the galaxy. We're just the last to realize it." From that day forward, the Council was no longer the heart of galactic power. Terran convoys moved where they wished. Their fleets controlled the gates. Their silence commanded more respect than any Council decree ever had. Planets that once begged the Council for protection now begged for Terran neutrality. No one dared to challenge them, not because of bombs or threats, but because they knew if the Black Fleet ever returned, no one could stop it. In the void, aboard the Terran flagship, The commander stood at the window, watching the council world grow smaller behind them. "They'll remember this," he said quietly. An officer beside him nodded. "Yes, sir. Not for what we did, but for what we didn't have to do." Outside, the Terran fleet vanished into the dark, leaving nothing but the soundless echo of fear in its wake. The galaxy had voted to banish Earth, believing it had stripped humanity of its power. But what it had truly done was give humanity something far greater: freedom, silence, time. And now the council sat beneath its broken star, surrounded by shadows it could no longer command. Humanity didn't beg for a place in their world. It built its own, and it ruled it without saying a word.